Hello and welcome back to Outcast. My name is Delta and my pronouns are Viva. Thank you for tuning in today. In this episode I will be talking about how anti-ableism is not considered to be a legitimate thing in many different ways. But before we get into the topic of this episode, I have a podcast recommendation for you that you're definitely gonna enjoy if you like this podcast. Bad Attitudes, an uninspiring podcast about disability, is a heavy on the sarcasm, light on the inspiration podcast about being disabled in real life. Hosted by Laura, a lifelong wheelchair user, it uses biting humor to educate and entertain while calling out ableism in all levels of society. You can listen to Bad Attitudes wherever you get your podcasts. And now let's get into the topic. So with so much anti-ableism, especially when it comes to language, there's two types of reaction that I have noticed. One of them is people thinking that anti-ableism is satire. So I make an educational video about ableist language to avoid, and people in the comments would be like, this has to be satire because apparently we are pathetic for even pointing this out. It's just not taken seriously by these people because they just want to continue saying slurs and just ableist words. Because so many of the insults that are used in mainstream to devalue people or whatever are rooted in ableist history. A lot of them were used to diagnoses and excuses to torture disabled people. Another reaction is that people who are trying to be anti-ableist are demonized. We are compared to every bigot on the planet. I've been called lesbo-music, homo-music, trans-music, racist, intersexist, every word in the book, simply for talking about ableist language. And for some reason it's ableist language specifically because people think we are just nitpicky or whatever. And it's not even that many people talking about it. I mean, it depends. More people are now talking about how terms that are used to insult intelligence are ableist, and more people are aware of the C word, not the one referring to the genitals, but the word referring to limited mobility. But even then, a lot of people are like, oh no, but the C word just means limited mobility. Why can't I say it? I mean, because it's been used as a slur. That's a pretty obvious thing. But we are either ridiculed or demonized for calling out anti-ableism, and that's the main thing I've seen. So I am very hesitant about calling out specific people for ableism because I'm afraid that either they will react in one of these two ways, or their followers will see it and react in one of these two ways, or sometimes even both. And I don't really call out specific people for ableism. What I tend to do is make podcast episodes or make generalized posts or here's some ableist terms you shouldn't say, here's why you shouldn't call bigotry phobia. I have done episodes about both of these things last year, and unfortunately they are not outdated yet. I fucking wish they were. In these episodes, it's purely educational. I don't call anyone out by name or anything because what's the point? I will just get hate for being a disabled person trying to fight ableism. It's just messed up that we're either made fun of for trying to fight oppression, or we are called the oppressors for trying to fight oppression. This is one thing that disabled people are constantly put into binaries. We're either demonized or made fun of. We are either capable of so much and we have all these expectations put on us, or we have none of the expectations because we're incapable. It's so many binaries when it comes to disability, including our activism. And one of these things I have seen recently, that was fucking weird. I don't understand how that happened. So I joined a Discord server that was for ASPEC people wanting to fight anti-racism, both in general and the ASPEC community. And since whiteness, besides being perisex, is the only privilege I have, I thought, you know what, I'm going to join that server because there's always something new I can learn about anti-racism. Even though I already do my best to listen to people of color, black people, indigenous people and stuff, there's always more to learn. So I joined that server and I looked through the channels once it got approved or whatever, and every second sentence just said ableism in it because they just apparently wanted to call bigotry phobia. And I am a person with actual phobias. I have multiple actual phobias, and they have nothing to do with bigotry. They don't make me a fucking bigot. Bigotry is not a phobia. Bigotry is not a mental illness. Can we stop stigmatizing mental illness? So I put a message in the general chat saying like, can we please not call bigotries phobias? Just like a general request into the entire space. And I woke up the next morning and I was linked to a previous message talking about anti-ableism being used against Yasmin Benoit. If you don't know who Yasmin Benoit is, she's an asexual and aromantic activist from the UK, and she's black. So she experienced so much shit for being a black arrows woman and talking about all this stuff. It's disgusting, I've seen it, and she's calling it out as well, how the ace community is racist. So that's one of the reasons I joined that Discord, because I was not aware of how bad it is, to be completely honest, because I'm white and it's not my direct experience. But anyway, for some reason I was linked to that. You know, how all of this, like me asking people not to use phobia when referring to bigotry, was somehow linked to people saying Yasmin Benoit is ableist. It's like, what? I have never called out Yasmin Benoit for anything ableist she did or might have done. I don't even know. I mean, I'm sure she uses like the phobia ending because everyone does, and I don't have the fucking time to call out every single person who does this because it's literally 98% of the queer community. I don't have time for that shit. I don't have the energy for that shit, especially if it means I get hostile reactions every time. And the reply also said like, oh, how this is used against like women of color. And I was like, I was talking to a space that's mostly white. Like, what? I don't understand where the fuck that came from. Like, why is anti-ableism somehow inherently racist? I'm not denying that some people call out ableism in a racist way, because I'm 99% sure that happens. But I haven't done that. I don't know why that is, and I don't know why anti-ableism was so conflated with racism. It's like, oh yeah, if you call it ableism, somehow you're a racist now. It's like, yeah, I've seen that shit. I've seen that shit that even somehow it made me an ableist to call it anti-ableism. It's like, oh yeah, apparently I'm a bigot for not wanting to be oppressed and triggered by having my mental illness be conflated with bigotry and hatred. It's like, what? I just don't get it. I don't know why they brought up Yasmin Benoit. I've never called out anyone by name. I mean, I don't think I did. It was definitely not her. I don't remember. I follow her. I like her stuff or retweet her stuff. But I have never called her out. But somehow, like, me calling her anti-ableism is like part of this big racist thing now. It's used against her. It's like, no, it's not. I just want to exist in a space that's accessible for me, that doesn't use my mental illness in like a demonizing way. Because it's like, destigmatize mental illness, until it actually comes to destigmatizing mental illness. And I even looked on Twitter, like, do I find anything about this Yasmin Benoit being ableist thing? And I found like one thread that didn't even get much attention, that was talking about how she doesn't use captions, and that was already over a year old. But they made it sound like it was this big narrative that people are falsely calling out ableism and using it against her to be racist. It's like, I did not see that whatsoever, and also what the person in the thread called out had nothing to do with using phobia to mean bigotry. That was like completely unrelated. That was like more about captions and deaf people and whatnot. Like, yeah, the whole phobia thing is definitely an issue, but I don't have the energy to call out everyone I see do this, because it is literally almost everyone. And the people who do harass Yasmin Benoit are often incredibly ableist themselves as well. So I don't know what these people are thinking. Like, none of them call it ableism. They are concerned with her being black and asexual and a woman. Like, that's what these harassing comments are all about. Like, just harassing her for being black and ace and a woman, and not for being ableist, because these people are already bigoted in so many ways. They do not care about ableism or fighting ableism. If she uses the phobia ending, I wouldn't even say like she is ableist. There's a difference between being ableist and doing an ableist thing. Like, yeah, when she calls bigotry against asexuals acephobia, that's ableist, but it doesn't mean that she is ableist. She is doing something that is ableist, but it's not the same thing as her as a person being ableist. I didn't say that, and even in the message that I put in that group, I never said the word ableism. I just said, can we please not call bigotry phobia? That's literally all I said. And somehow it was twisted into me using this against like Yasmin Benoit and like women of color in general. It's like, where did I do that if I did not call anyone out by name? Like, what? Because people just want to keep being ableist and not question it whatsoever, not reflect on it at all. Because challenging ableism means challenging so much of the language we use, and most people are not willing to do that. And also, I don't even know where they're getting this whole thing from, that so many people are accusing her of being ableist because she uses phobia for bigotry. Most people don't call that out. As I said, they don't take it seriously. I'm one of the only people who calls it out. It's maybe like 2 or 3 people on my fucking timeline who call that shit out. I'm not sure where they're getting it from, that it's this whole mob of people, because no one gives a fuck. Even the most anti-ableist people often really don't give a shit. And it's not many people who call it out, because we all know what the reaction is. But yeah, somehow being anti-ableist means we are like pathetic or bigoted. It's like, what? It's wild. But like, even if she was actually ableist, like someone being racist in the process of calling her out does not negate the ableism. It's not right. They shouldn't call it out in a racist way. They just shouldn't. Or if you're white, be careful about calling out a person of color. But it doesn't mean they're not ableist. And it just erases disabled people of color. Because I've seen so many threads about ableist language by disabled people of color. Like, there's a lot of people who actually agree. Most people I've actually seen this whole phobia thing called out were people of color. So I don't know how that's racist now. I'm so confused. And it just goes hand in hand with like you're being nitpicky. You're just trying to find a thing to be racist about when, like, no. I didn't even call her out, but even if I did, you know, I would just say, like, please don't do this because it's ableist. Or maybe even wouldn't say ableist because people are just pretty much allergic to the word ableist. So I probably would have phrased it differently to not have that word in there because people are fucking sensitive. But this whole thing also implies that because some people were racist in calling out the use of phobia to mean bigotry, that the whole point isn't valid, even though it's just the way it was done. The way it was called out is problematic and should not be condoned, but the point is still valid, but people are treating it as if the point itself is the racism and is not valid. And that's a way of twisting this whole thing around to just any disabled person apparently being racist for calling this out, even though we're just trying to be anti-ableist and be safe in spaces. It's just a weird way of demonizing people for being nitpicky and supposedly making everything about disability by saying that the point itself is just racist, and it's not. It also just ignores how anti-racism and anti-ableism are deeply connected historically. Like, they are interlinked, intertwined. You cannot really separate the two. So by calling anti-ableism racist, you are especially harming disabled people of color. Another thing is that the people who frame anti-ableists as the real bigots also almost always say we are tone policing by calling out ableism. Like, what? As if ableism is just about tone? As if every other bigotry is real except for ableism, because ableism is just tone. As if ableism wasn't something that materially and psychologically harmed people. Like, what the fuck? You're just ableist, both by silencing us and by implying that ableism is just tone, and we're just tone policing instead of calling out things that actively cause disabled people harm. Yeah, so that's annoying because people just demonize us and think we want to be oppressed when we rightfully call out ableism or ask people to not say certain things that are just factually ableist. I mean, Ebden on Twitter made a good thread about using missia instead of phobia for bigotry, and they are a person of color, so what? Their Twitter handle is EBTHEN if you want to follow, but they have a lot of tweets, so maybe you won't find it right away. I might put it in the description. And other people have made threads about ableist language as well. One of them that I really liked, but they got so much shit for it for an empathy thing. think I talked about that in my empathy episode, that they actually ended up deleting it, but it was there, and it was also by a person of color. I just wanted a space where I could learn more about anti-racism, and I would have expected that this space is dedicated to fighting one type of bigotry. They wouldn't perpetuate another, but every other sentence just had this ableism in, and I just politely asked them to not do this. And it was actually the admin who compared it to being racist. It's like, I'm sorry, but it's not. I mean, racism is a huge issue, especially in the ace community and ace community in general. But so is ableism, especially if ace and aro people cannot talk about their experience without conflating phobia and bigotry. And that's an issue in the entire queer community. And it hurts. It just hurts so much. Anyway, that's all I can say about this, and it's really disheartening that anti-ableism is not being taken seriously and ableism is not really considered a real problem. At the end of the day, no one really cares about disabled people. Like, no one gives a fuck. I see people on Twitter talk about how NPD, like narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, all of these are demonized, and it's only like 3 people talking about this. Like, it's ableist. We need more people talking about this, but everyone just thinks we're being nitpicky and like trying to find something to be oppressed about when the oppression is fucking real. We are not safe in so many spaces that equate personality disorders with being evil or phobias with being bigoted. It's horrible, the ableism in queer communities. But ableism is considered to be the least priority of all. And that honestly just hurts a lot, because so many spaces are not safe for me that I would need, and I don't feel like I belong anywhere because I'm not safe. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. If you want to support me, you can do that on patreon.com/out_castpod. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at out_castpod. If you want to contact me, you can do that in the DMs on Twitter or Instagram, or email me. My email address is gndrqr98@gmail.com. If you would like to send me a voice message for this podcast, I will put the link for that in the description. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend or on social media. Shout it down from the rooftops, whatever feels right for you. And please give me a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to this episode. That will mean a lot to me. And remember to listen to Bad Attitudes podcast. It's amazing. The link for that will also be in the show notes. Thank you for listening. See you next time.